Going back to what Alice A. Bailey said, she says, thus the expressed aims and efforts of the United Nations will be eventually brought to fruition and a new church of God, one that worships the cosmic Christ. Gathered out of all religions and spiritual groups will unitedly bring to an end the great heresy of separation. Now, I said to you before, keep note of the thing about the atomic bomb, because she actually says that the atomic bomb was essential for this forerunner stage. Since 1945, this mushroom cloud has been hanging over the psyche of the human race. At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. I know that maybe some of you have seen Walter Weiss's presentation that he did on the UN and the occult agenda, I think he calls it. And he talks a lot about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I'm not really a French person, so I can't really say it properly. But anyway, this guy, he's a Jesuit priest, or was, I should say, he's dead now. But he was very fascinated. He was a Christian mystic, or a Catholic mystic, I should say. And he was very fascinated with this whole idea of an omega point. And he speaks about it a lot. And it's essentially about this point of convergence of all ideologies for the whole universe to work towards. And he says that the omega point is basically the divergence of all our ideas into one, and we form the cosmic Christ. Now, that philosophy of the cosmic Christ, or the omega point, or everything coming together, is something that you see right throughout the UN. This is what the UN Secretary General, so the head of the UN, said in 1982 about Teilhard. He said, the French philosopher who has had the greatest influence on the metaphysical and planetary evolution of the United Nations. He had the most significant philosophical impact on the United Nations. A man that was talking about a cosmic Christ. I want you to think about this, because this is about a spiritual unity more than it is about a political unity. And this cosmic Christ concept appears in books by Alice A. Bailey, who happens to be the occult prophet. She's dead now too, but during 1919 and 1947, I think it was, she wrote these papers, which then got collated after she died, into a book called The Externalization of the Hierarchy. It's interesting that she started in 1919, because that happened to be the year that the League of Nations was formed. But then she continued on, as I said, until around 1946. And she talks about this threefold method of the cosmic Christ reappearance. Whenever she talks about Christ, she doesn't talk about Jesus Christ. She's talking about the cosmic Christ. And she says there's three things that need to happen. First, there needs to be an overshadowing, a telepathic influence on the minds of prepared disciples and initiates. This will be his primary work on the mental plane and the most effective method for his spiritual interference in world affairs. Thus, he will have outposts of his consciousness in every nation. Now, it just sounds all a bit bizarre sounding. But what she's trying to say is that we have people who are set up who have worldwide influence on world affairs and will influence how their minds think. They are prepared disciples to influence the world on the spiritual plane. And she says this whole process is the period from 1946 to 2025. And she calls it the stage of the forerunner. Very, very interesting. So approximately from 1946 to 2025. Now, I thought it was interesting that she says approximately, because 1945, the year before, was when the UN was formed. And you'll see that she actually really is referring to the UN when she talks about this work of the forerunner. She says, thus a great new movement is proceeding and a tremendously increased interplay and interaction is taking place. This will go on until AD 2025. During the years intervening between now and then, very great changes will be seen taking place and a great general assembly of the hierarchy, held as usual every century in 2025. The date in all possibility will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. The present cycle, she uses the same thing, is the stage of the forerunner, preparatory in nature. So between 1946, approximately, and 2025, they were preparing for something. Now, I said to you before, keep note of the thing about the atomic bomb, because she actually says that the atomic bomb was essential for this forerunner stage. She says the atomic bomb, though used only twice destructively, ended the resistance of the powers of evil because its potency is predominantly etheric. Now, I had to look that word up because I don't use that kind of word. It just means spiritual. Its uses are twofold at this time, as the forerunner of the release of energy which will change the mode of human living and inaugurate the new age. The atomic bomb emerged from the first ray of Ashram, which means, I have to look these things up. I really don't understand. So I quickly Google, what's the first ray of Ashram? Okay. Anyway, the atomic bomb emerged from the first ray of Ashram, which is God's will. I want you to just keep that thought in mind too. Working in conjunction with the fifth ray group, which means science and research. From the long-range point of view, its intent was and is purely beneficent. Do you know what beneficent means? Beneficial, essentially. She was saying that the atomic bomb had a beneficial quality. It was exactly what God willed. Really? Not my God. Maybe her God. Because what did it do? It made all of the nations and all of these religions want to come together because, once again, who wants to be annihilated by an atomic bomb? It prepares the mind to be united with people that you might not be united with otherwise. You might have beliefs that are entirely different, but if you've got a common enemy, a common threat, you will do everything to be united to survive. And that's exactly what that atomic bomb did. Tucker Carlson, who's not necessarily the greatest source of truth, but I just thought it was interesting, he credits demons for the invention of nuclear technology, which if you read what we just read from Alice A. Bailey, you kind of think, well, maybe he knows something there. And he says, it's very clear to me that these nuclear weapons are demonic. Now, if you know a little bit of the history about the nuclear testing that they were doing for the atomic bombs, this man, he was the one who headed it up. And it says his name was Robert Oppenheimer. And he was a worshipper of Lord Krishna, which is a Hindu god. And he used to read the spiritual text for that. And when they did the very test of the atomic bomb, which was called the Trinity test, and it was so successful, interesting name, isn't it? Trinity test. Now I am become death, the destroyer of the worlds, is what he said. He quoted from Lord Krishna. Do you think maybe there is some demonic influence there? Because it had a significant impact on how the world was managed after that. This is what this historical article says, the decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a historian's perspective. It says the bombings also had a profound impact on the global nuclear non-proliferation movement and the establishment of the United Nations. The horror of the atomic bombings galvanized international efforts. It made nuclear disarmament one of its top priorities. Going back to what Alice A. Bailey said, she says, thus the expressed aims and efforts of the United Nations will be eventually brought to fruition and a new church of God, one that worships the cosmic Christ. Gathered out of all religions and spiritual groups will unitedly bring to an end the great heresy of separation. So what's the heresy of separation opposed to? The truth of their type of unity. The UN is every nation, including the Holy See. The Holy See is a nation and a church. They are at the table as a political entity at the UN. It includes Catholic NGOs, Protestant NGOs, the occult, esoteric, New Age and Eastern religion NGOs, Islamic NGOs, Jewish NGOs, ecumenical organizations, trade unions, secret fraternal societies such as the Knights of Malta and the Freemasons, political think tanks such as the Heritage Foundation and the Club of Rome. It literally, if you can think of anything that has any power in this world, it is part of the UN. That's how united the world has become. It is the three unclean spirits united with the kings of the earth. But is it of the whole world yet? It is the leaders. The second method, and this is the bit where I believe we're at now. Because she said, we have the preparatory phase, which was that forerunner phase, which was stage 1. It ended in 2025. That's what she said. She wanted it to end then. Well, she said that obviously the demons were going to plan for it to end then. And then they were going to consider whether or not we were here. The second method, by stimulating the Christ life, which is that whole idea of oneness, or consciousness within the masses of humanity, leading to a reorientation of human desire. This involves the astral, God's will, or emotional plane. A good will is released into the hearts of mankind and they become more disposed to create right human relationships, which is the major objective of the Christ triple activity. I don't understand all that she says, truly, to be honest. But she's saying something like, is there enough motivation in mankind to be one? Is there enough motivation? And in 2025, in May, it happened to be the same time as the Roman Catholics had their thing where they were working out the Pope. What's that called? A conclave. It was also called a conclave. Exactly the same time. They had the conclave for the occult world and the conclave for the Roman Catholic world at the exact same time. And their convention that they had actually happened to be at a Franciscan, Catholic priests monastery place in America. This group here that were deciding whether or not we had reached the next stage in the externalization of the hierarchy. And so what they were analyzing, have we reached the point where we can be so filled with this spirit of wanting to be united? And I believe we have. Because what we saw in the last few years was really the forming of two groups. Over the years, there has been the forming of two groups. Really, if you go back to the French Revolution and the annihilation of the monarchs of Europe, you actually move into a parliamentary system where you always have, the left side of politics and the right side of politics, and there's no in between. So you have to decide, am I going to be this side or this side? And you have to choose. Before then, you had a king, and you could be ambivalent if you really wanted to. But once you have a parliamentary system, you push people one way or the other way. And it's the same with society in general. People have been pushed more and more into one of two camps. There's no third option anymore. And during COVID, it was more so than ever, was it not? You were either a vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer. You couldn't be neither. And so we had things like not only vaccines, but climate, gender fluidity, all of these things were pushing people one way or the other. And you could disagree with people on just about everything else, but if they were on this side, you could unite with them. And so you had the formation of two groups. There's only one thing that's missing, is uniting those two groups into the one. And the way to do it is through threat of annihilation. How did the leaders get brought together of the world? How did the leaders of all the spiritual entities and political entities of the world get brought together? They got brought together because there was a threat of annihilation. How is and the whole world bit going to be added to it? Through threat of annihilation. Because when you're threatened with annihilation, you were interested in self-preservation at all costs. Even the cost of truth. This is a picture of an atomic bomb going off. I'm glad I've never actually seen it in person, but as you can see, there is a mushroom at the top, The bomb explodes midair and sends fire down from heaven. Some things they just vaporize. But the heat is so excessive that fires break out all over the city or wherever it is that you've had the bomb explode. Since 1945, this mushroom cloud has been hanging over the psyche of the human race. It was because of the nuclear bomb that the countdown clock has been slowly ticking away, with these scientists every year coming up with a new prediction as to how close we are to complete annihilation. And it started off, in 1947, 7 minutes to midnight. I mean, where did they get the 7 minutes? It's an interesting number, isn't it? When you think about the number of 7 in the Bible. And it's progressively moved closer to midnight. And since then, they've added extra things, not just the atomic bomb, but climate change. And that has been a great driver in managing the economic affairs of the world, climate change. Look at what's happened to Australia. Climate change is the reason why we're in the situation that we're in with fuel. We were self-sufficient in 2005. From 2005 onwards, climate change was the reason why we slowly became non-self-sufficient. And of course, AI. If we can be annihilated by AI, well, we need to unite on that one as well. But since the war with Iran, there's been a lot of chatter about nuclear war again. And there's talk about how Israel has many, they think 80 nuclear weapons. But because they've never admitted to it and no one's ever investigated, it's beyond any kind of international regulation. And they have a really low tolerance point, apparently, to using these nuclear weapons. Basically, if they feel like they're threatened, they can use them. Whereas in the international regulation, if there is a likelihood that another nation is going to use it against you, you can use it. Israel does not have that kind of rule. It's just, if we think you're going to try and annihilate us, we're going to use them. And it's interesting because just recently, only a few days ago, there was a man who was a liaison officer for the UN with a international NGO, and he says that he was giving up his career to leak possible nuke missile strike plan from the UN. And this is his public post. You can actually go on and find it. This is actually literally taken from his post. You can read his letter of resignation and a little bit of stuff that he puts to the side. I've just blown up a portion of it. It says, "I cannot in good conscience be part of or witness to what is happening at the time when the UN is preparing for possible nuclear weapon use." Is it possible? Well, let's just go back, because remember I was reading from Alice A. Bailey, and she said there's twofold reasons for the atomic bomb. One was it was purely beneficent. It brought around this whole forerunner stage. But then she says it is as a means in the hands of the United Nations to enforce the outer forms of peace and thus give time for teaching on peace and on the growth of goodwill to take effect. The atomic bomb does not belong to the 3 nations who perfected it or who own the secrets at present, list them there. It belongs to the United Nations for use, or let us rather hope simply for threatened use, when aggressive action on the part of any nation rears its ugly head. How do we bring about unity? We create a fear of annihilation. Pete Hegseth, the head of the War Department in America, it's a very interesting guy, because you remember how Alice A. Bailey, she said that the atomic bomb was part of God's will. He actually has a tattoo on his bicep called Juice, I think actually might be on his forearm here. But anyway, it says Juice Volt. Now, I didn't know what it was a week ago, but I know now. It means God wills it. God's will. Anyway, in a recent, and he's got Christian Crusader tattoos on him as well. But in a recent press briefing, he quoted from Psalm 144, 1-2. Now, it seems all like, of course it's a logical psalm to quote from, because it talks about how God will help you to go to war and he'll make you successful and all the rest of it. But I actually wondered whether he was signaling something. Because I'm going to show you something about the Manhattan Project, the project that actually came up with the atomic bomb, that did all the experiments. It was called the Manhattan Project. Not because it was in Manhattan. It was nowhere near Manhattan. It was very far away from Manhattan. It was down South America, like not South America, but in the southern part of the US. It means place of bows and arrows, or the place that you can procure the timber for bows and arrows. Why on earth? I mean, literally, you would think that you would name something with a meaning, would you not? Particularly something as significant as this. So they must have named it with intent. And when you look at the logo that they had, that the people who are part of the Manhattan Project wore, this is it. There is this sort of all-seeing eye type thing up the top, and then it sends a lightning bolt down from heaven, fire down from heaven. And then there's this massive explosion at the bottom, which is representing the atomic particles coming apart and having this explosion. You know, in Psalm 144, verse 6, it says, "Cast forth lightning and scatter them, shoot out thine arrows and destroy them." I don't know, maybe I'm just reading into things, but maybe they're trying to signal, or maybe Satan is using them. I don't know. But the fire from heaven, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But what happens with a nuclear weapon, particularly an atomic bomb, sounds very similar to our vision that Ellen White had. She says, "Great balls of fire were falling upon houses, and from these balls fiery arrows were flying in every direction. It was impossible to check the fires that were kindled, and many places were being destroyed. The terror of the people was indescribable." Look, I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to have an atomic bomb, but I think it's highly likely that we're going to have some sort of nuclear weapon. I don't know, but I think it is highly likely. Can you imagine? There's peace talks at the moment, apparently. I think it's all a ruse, personally. But imagine if next week, or in a month's time even, an atomic bomb was dropped. And, you know, we've got fuel crisis, food crisis, all of this. How much would it take for everyone to be united together? Because they were afraid. Fear drives people, doesn't it? It would be self-preservation at all costs. Truth would be laid aside, even amongst God's people. Now, that would lead to the third stage of the externalization of the hierarchy, which is Satan appearing. Revelation 13 to 14 talks about fire coming down from heaven on earth. And this is what causes all of the world to gather together to make an image unto the beast. If you can make fire come down from heaven that looks like an atomic bomb, I can guarantee you the whole world will be united. And it's very, very interesting that Alice A. Bailey called the UN's period, and also called the nuclear bomb, which helped the UN to form, she called it the stage of the forerunner. Who is the forerunner in the time of Jesus? It was John the Baptist, right? Who is the forerunner now? It is God's people. But both of them were called an Elijah. What did Elijah do? He called fire down from heaven. Do you think maybe, I don't know, the demons have a control over these things? And this is where we're heading. You know, in Revelation chapter 16, it kind of tells you how all the powers will come together. And Revelation 17 kind of extends upon it. And you kind of get to the end of Revelation 17, and you see the Antichrist power at its peak. And then Revelation 18 comes along, and as Babylon has fallen, that great city that's made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of its fornication. And come out of her, my people, because it's no longer as powerful as it used to be. There has been a people who no longer are under its power and influence, because they've joined the faithful and chosen city.